So, good afternoon and welcome to the BTEC Tech Award in Music Practice Component 1 support session. You might hear a few bleeps here and there just as we start off as people join the session. So hopefully it won't interrupt the audio too much here. Just to let you know that the session is being recorded as well, and I'll make a recording of the session available over the next few days, early next week. So the first thing that I need to do is just to make sure that everyone can hear me. So there should be a raise hand icon in your menus. So if you can hear me, if you could click on this just to raise your hand and let me know that you can hear. Just give people a minute to do that. And just to let you know that if there are any problems with the audio or you experience any problems, the first thing to try is just logging out of the session and then logging back in. Quite often that will fix the problem. Just put a message in the chat box about that as well. Okay, looks like most people have raised their hands, so I'm just going to lower all of those now. Okay, so just another thing there is there's obviously the chat box function available, and you can use this to communicate with myself or any other people in the session. At the end of the session, there'll be time for questions. So if you've got any questions at all, you can type them into the chat box. Or alternatively, you can use the raise hand icon and ask them over a mic, and I can unmute you if you want to do that as well. So we will get going now, now that all those formalities are done. So just the first thing to look at is just an update around the performance measures for BTEC for Key Stage 4. Obviously this year the BTEC First Award in Music and the Tech Award in Music Practice were included on performance measures, and the DfE confirmed also that they would include any qualifications that were on 2020 measures on 2021 and 2022 measures as well. And due to the COVID-19 situation, DfE confirmed earlier this year as well that all qualifications included on 2022 performance measures would be rolled over onto 2023 as well. That does mean that the first award as well will be available to deliver, and for that to count towards performance measures for the centre. And the first award currently has a final registration date of 31st December 2021, and final certification is 31st December 2023. The Tech Award, obviously, again, is included on performance measures up to 2023. We do know that after that, the requirements to be on 2024 performance measures, as it will be now, are requiring some small changes to this version of the Tech Award. The first award won't be changed to meet the requirements for that, and there will be some, as I said, some minor changes to the Tech Award, which I will talk about a little bit later on as well. So just moving on to have a look at the Tech Award as an overview. Obviously it differs slightly to the first award for those of you that have been used to delivering that. So the main difference is it's made up of 3 components, all of which are mandatory. So there's sort of no optionality in there. Each learner will have to complete and achieve all 3 of the components. However, there's no exam in the qualification. There is an external assessment, but that is task-based, which is done over a number of hours and weeks, and that is a 12-week period with 19 hours of supervised time and 4 hours of prep time as well. And usually, well, this year the brief was released at the end of January with submission in May, so there's a good long period to work on that external assessment task as well. Another benefit of the Tech Award, I think, is that it does include graded level 1. So at qualification level, you can have a level 1 pass, merit and distinction, which again differs from the first award where there was just a level 1 fallback. Again, in terms of performance measures for the centre, this is better because of the performance points that differentiation at the bottom end can give you, as the graded level 1 will achieve different points as opposed to the level 1 fallback in the first award, which was a fixed number of performance points at 1.25 points, which sits just obviously there the lower, well, would be essentially equivalent to a grade 1 at GCSE in terms of the points that would be achieved there. So the 3 components are really there, mainly that would fall in a kind of sequential way of delivery as well. So component 1 is exploring music products and styles, and that's what we're going to look at in more detail in this session as well. It allows learners to explore the different techniques and styles of music across a wide range, and you can focus things a little depending on your cohort as well, which we'll talk about, and allows the learners to build up their knowledge of the characteristics of different music, as well as building their musical theory knowledge. Component 2 is really focused on the individual developing their own skills in the areas that interest them, but also developing their personal and professional skills, and I'll be arranging a session to look at component 2 in a little more detail in the near future. And then component 3 really draws the knowledge and skills from components 1 and 2 together in responding to a commercial music brief, and this is where a brief is set to give a scenario, and the brief is generally they will be given a list of 4 different styles and a list of 10 different songs, and a learner would have to choose one of those songs and rework it into a different style from the list of 4. So it's really bringing together their skills and knowledge around the styles and the techniques from component 1, as well as building in their individual skills that they've developed in component 2, and the professional skills of meeting deadlines and being prepared and everything like that as well. So that's the structure of the course as a kind of brief overview there as well. So really, this session is to look at possible approaches to component 1 and different ways that you might want to look at it, and again, depending on your cohort and the specialisms that they have. Learning aim A can be approached by looking at it in either a stylistic sort of way or by focusing on musical elements. What we've done there is we require learners to look at the key characteristics and techniques that are used in a range of styles, and they have to use examples that cover performing, composing, and production in there. And in the authorised assignment brief, it requires them to cover at least 8 short examples covering different genres across those 3 things. Now, in providing those short examples, we do say that they don't necessarily have to practically engage with all of those 3. So you might find that your cohort is more performance-based and don't really touch on the production side of things. And in those cases, the short examples that you can use can include pre-existing clips as well. So you can have learners that are using elements of production to show the techniques in a particular style. They can use a short 10-15 second clip from an existing piece of music and be explaining that technique. So they don't actually have to carry out all of those, but obviously it's encouraged to do that. We do say obviously that it can be solely listening examples, but obviously it's better for learners to be practically engaging with those, creating those examples as well. So looking at the sort of 2 different approaches of looking at it in a stylistic way or by focusing on musical elements, we've got the different ways that you could do this and cover the requirements of the teaching and unit content, but also in terms of preparing for the assessment as well. So we've given a kind of brief example here where the genres-based approach is looking at things like, so synth pop, as this could cover things like the music technology side, and obviously comes from the pop music 80s. You could choose film music, as this could cover Western classical music in there, but also bring in elements of music technology as well. Bhangra, as this would cover world music, blues for the early foundations of pop music, British invasion, disco, grunge, and EDM in there as well. But obviously you can choose genres that you cover that may be more appropriate for your cohort as well, as every centre is going to have certain specialities that they want to focus on to suit their learners, but also being mindful of the possibilities of the styles that may come up in component 3 for when you're covering those as well. So you would want to cover a range of examples of genres, and this is kind of a minimum that would need to be done. Whereas to cover and make sure that you're giving learners the full opportunity to meet the expectations of component 3, you may want to cover more genres than this as well. Just got a question come in. The distinction example for learning MA uses an element approach. Can a student get a distinction if they structure it in a genre-based way? Yeah, of course they can. So, I mean, either way of approaching it in terms of genre or the musical elements way would enable learners to meet the distinction criteria. Obviously, that then comes down to the content of their work for learning AIME in there as well. So yeah, the recommendation is to in the spec to have at least 2 different styles from, I will call them eras rather than decades as it does in the spec, from the eras of popular music that are listed there. And then you should be covering at least one of the styles from the other solid bullet pointed areas of music, so the Western classical music, etc. For the teaching content, that's how that should be covered. However, for the assessment, the authorised assignment brief does say that it needs to be at least 8 styles, and it doesn't specify which styles or areas or decades that those come from, but probably through your teaching you've covered a range of those, and the learners can select the most appropriate ones that they want to use, but also the ones that they feel that are going to that they can cover in the most depth as well, and therefore access hopefully those higher marks as well. So in terms of covering those and allowing learners to access different styles could be a way to approach that as well. Then looking at it from a kind of musical elements approach, we've listed kind of some different elements there that and styles that could be used to cover that. So obviously in terms of rhythm, lots of centres I know do things like African drumming, samba bands, things like that, and that would be a great way to explore rhythm and the element of rhythm there. In terms of linking it with production more, you could move into things like techno and drum and bass as well to explore the rhythms in there. Then you can look at scales, tonality and melody. Obviously blues would be a great way to start for any pop music, as it gives a great grounding of the scales, tonality and the melodies used in lots of pop music there. And then obviously jazz, film music, rock and world music can build into that and give a wider breadth of the scales and tonality and melody there. Again, chords and harmony, obviously choosing the Western classical music there as a good foundation, and building that into film music, blues and rock as well. And then for the instrumentation and timbre, again, film music, world music can be used in there to give a broad sort of choice of instruments and timbre, and then rock and classical as well. Just another question come in. You use a mixture of the 2 separate approaches for learning AIME. Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't choose to mix it up and use a mixture of both, just as long as it's obviously what we're aiming for is the evidence to be clear. So firstly, it makes it easy for you to mark it and look at it in that way and be easily identifying the evidence that's in front of you there. And then obviously if that's clear, it then is clearer for the SV as well to go through if and when they look at that work as well. So I think you can use that, but as long as the evidence that you're presenting is clear, then that's not a problem. Just another question. Will there be more examples of assess learner work for component 1 so we can see 2 separate approaches? I'm not sure what's going to be produced this year. Obviously, the whole situation has impacted on the work that we would normally collect in and be able to use as exemplar material each year for this year. So I need to consult with colleagues in terms of what we will be making available and what we have available to do any more sort of exemplar work. But each year we obviously do have the Oscar material that gets produced, and quite often that would come from the previous year's work as well. So what's the stage of that? I'm not quite sure how that's progressing, but I would expect some more learner work in terms of Oscar material to become available, yes, this year. Right. So then, so the idea around Learning Aim A is obviously that learners are investigating these different styles and the musical elements and the techniques that are key to these different styles. They can then identify those techniques and give a small excerpt showing that, and then be able to explain and evaluate and describe those techniques as well, and look at the effect that that has on the music. And that's what we're really looking for around Learning Aim A. Moving on to Learning Aim B for component 1 is where they've learnt about all these different techniques and styles, and then it's about them putting it into practice in their own work as well. So Learning Aim B is where we the learners will respond to at least 3 different music products, and those products are listed in the spec, and they're down as live performance, audio recording, music for media, computer games, film, an original song or composition, and a DAW project. Now, again, just to sort of emphasize that we're not looking for full completed pieces of work at this point. What we're looking for, as it's exploring the music products and styles, is some ideas and starting points and ideas that are sort of developing as well. So the standard in terms of this is, you know, we're looking for the ideas and the techniques to be developing as well. And that's what we're trying to make clear and come across for this component, is that it's the real sort of development and exploration of the component. So the examples of work here are, again, 30 to 60 seconds long, and they would choose at least 3 from that list. Now, what we've done here is put together a bit of a list of the probable products that a learner might go look at and produce work for, depending on their specialisms. So, as I said, in terms of this, if you are a centre that has more students that are focused on performing, they don't necessarily have to engage with the production side of things as a practical activity in this for assessment. So they could choose to do the live performance. They could then choose to do music for film, media, computer games. As we say there, it's not necessarily on computer. It could be a composition that's produced in another way, and then also an original song or composition there as well is another way to approach the performance route that you may have. Again, the flip side of that is you may have learners that are totally focused on production and are not performers at all, get quite a few emails around this from centres. And again, it's kind of clear that they can do an audio recording. So they would be in charge of a recording session and record musicians performing a section of a song, and they would then capture that song in a certain style and trying to use the production and recording techniques that would suit that genre. Then again, creating a music for film, media, or computer games, again, they could approach that from a computer-based approach, so using samples or loops and creating music using that way. And again, they could create a DAW project as well. Just noted, sort of seeing a few questions coming in. Does the live performance have to be an original song, or can this be a cover? So the live performance can be a cover of a song. Again, 30 to 60 second example, that could be a verse and a chorus. So what we're looking for in that is for them to be putting the techniques of the style into practice. So you might choose to cover a certain style with that live performance to make sure that the evidence that they're producing there is really showing that they understand the techniques to do with that style. Someone else asking, are you able to tie in component component A and B, so learning aim A and B together? Usually component A is film music, where they explore the short style, but at the same time they create a 30-second example for learning aim B. So the authorized assignment brief online actually does cover learning aim A and B in one assignment, and you could be producing material that covers learning aim E and carry that over into learning aim B as well. Someone else just asking, does the audio recording need to be multi-track, or can it be a live ensemble recording? In terms of what we're looking for around the audio recording, we are really asking for a multi-track because it's around the production techniques and the recording techniques that you would be associating with that style and genre. So rather than just doing a live recording there. It's possible for students to complete one activity that covers all three products comprehensively. Student writes their own song, then performs it, then uses the DAW to finalize composition performance using different effects and techniques. In terms of that, we are asking, I believe it's in the criteria, but I'm just going to double check that it has to be in different genres. So I just want to check the wording of that, but I'm sure the assignment brief asks for different genres as well, in terms of the three things that are there. Learning aim A is wide genres. Use of music theory. Although the criteria doesn't say it specifically. Just reading a couple of different things at the moment just to confirm that. I mean, it's saying about different musical techniques and resources, so it's certainly implied that it should be in more than one style for that learning aim as well. Just to sort of confirm that there. could 3 students perform a song as a group and all be assessed? In terms of that, yes, as they're sort of showing their own interpretation of the techniques that are informing that. When we had visit side, the risk ratings, I was told that I should learning aims and have different deadlines. I like the sign brief. In fact, they can overlap a bit. So in terms of that question about sort of putting the learning aims together in an assignment or separating them out, personally, for me, I think it's clearer in my head if they're separated out for myself. But that's what works for me as I would probably deliver this. For your learners and yourself, you may feel that combining it and covering both learning aims together, you can do that, and that would be fine as well. It is about how you approach it and how you set that brief that suits you as a teacher and your learners as well. I'm sure the sort of risk ratings thing was a recommendation in there rather than a straight instruction to do it, because I think that should be flexible as long as you're allowing learners to fully cover all criteria in each of those learning aims and allowing them to access that. That shouldn't be a problem. And what would you be expecting for a door project? In terms of door project for this, again, it could be a wide range of things that are there in terms of what a door project could be, and actually could be quite similar to either the audio recording, or it could be an original song or composition, or it could be a project that they're creating with using samples and loops. So I think there's a bit of blurriness between what certain pieces of work could be, as obviously a piece of music for media, computer games could be done on a door as a project and therefore could be either of those, but you need to do at least 3 using different styles and techniques. So you could do 2 very similar projects and class one as the music for media and the other one as a door project. So there's different ways of covering some of those there as well. Door project be arrangements of the cover version. So yeah, so it could be a kind of remix, an arrangement type task as well, that could go into that as well. Just going through, just making sure I've covered each of them. How much students be writing when evaluating their products? Is there a writing guide available for this? There isn't a sort of guide in terms of how much they should be writing and evaluating their products. What we want is sufficient detail in there around the techniques and the styles that they're using and how they've approached that, and that could really vary depending on what they've done in each of their products there as well. Sorry, I realised as well, didn't quite finish off the sort of different routes as well. So with the composition route, again, we've identified 3 sort of more obvious ones that would be there for composition, which would be the music for media, the original song or composition, and the door project. Again, as we said, could be a just a project that is done as an original composition that could be done on a door, for example. Could a door project simply be a mix of pre-existing stems, even if they don't rearrange the structure? So I think in terms of that, I think it comes down to how much work they would be doing on that, and justifying that as a door project. I think the idea behind it is more in terms of an arrangement task and a remix task, rather than just a simply sort of mixing production type task. So I think, would be expecting more than just a mix with adding effects. I think it would be looking for either rearranging material or adding new material in there, as well as doing that as well. So could it be working with an a cappella stem and adding to it? So having an a cappella stem and creating material underneath that, I think would meet that requirement of creating that door project in there as well. Yes. So I think those different routes then allow you to focus the component one more to meet the types of learner that you have. I know when the spec first sort of was released, I got lots of questions around you know, the type of thing of, I mainly get students that are totally into production. They wouldn't want to do any performance in there. So I think looking at it in this way and really going through it, where you can see that they don't have to do performance. Obviously, it's encouraged to engage with the performance side of things, and it will give them a greater understanding and grounding for as a musician if they do that. But in terms of actually producing the evidence for the component, they don't need to produce, say, a piece of performance. They can approach it from a production and composition type route in there instead. So do we have any questions around component one now? I'll just give people a couple of seconds to see if there are any questions coming in. Hopefully that's explained the approach to the component in enough detail there. Okay, couple of questions just come in. For those with 3-year Key Stage 4, how would you advise we best use this time to prepare starting component 1 in year 10? So in terms of this time, looking forward to potentially having learners back in centres in September, I would certainly be looking at setting them maybe some investigation tasks around some different styles to look at. Maybe, I don't know what technology you're using with learners, if any at all. If you are holding sort of remote teaching classes with them or anything like that. I think the types of tasks that I would be looking at getting them to do at the moment would be, looking at, a key artist from a certain genre, having a listen to different styles and pieces of music from that genre, and maybe get them, to do a presentation to a peer or something like that around that, and talk to their peers around the style. So there's this sort of shared learning as well, that could happen. And those are the sorts of tasks that would really give them a good grounding coming into next year on those different styles as well. How long do people take to cover component one? Sorry, that just disappeared off my screen for a second, so I didn't get to read all of that. So in terms of that, it's essentially 36 guided learning hours for the course, so it's around 30% of the course for that. So I think a lot of the learning and things like that would probably take up most of a first term, and then the assessment would go into the second term for that, depending on how many hours you're delivering the qualification on over a week as well. But that's a kind of rough idea. Someone asking if there likely to be any sort of textbook for this course. It's something that Pearson haven't done for music on a purely sort of business decision, I think, in terms of numbers. It is something that I'm looking into with colleagues, and I'll try and keep people updated around that as best I can. There are the paid for resources for the qualification. They're quite expensive off the top of my head, and it gives some sort of class resources and things like that in there as well. I haven't particularly seen them myself. Some people may well have bought those or looked at those, so they may be able to answer that for you. Okay, just catching up with some of these questions. The assignment brief seems to suggest that Learning Aim B examples should be from styles covered in Learning Aim A. Is this correct? Obviously, you would have covered the styles and techniques that you've taught them in Learning Aim A, and therefore the styles and techniques that get covered in Learning Aim B are probably going to be the best ones to cover, because the learners will have the best knowledge around those styles and techniques because they've covered in Learning Aim A, but not necessarily have to be, but that would be the best sort of option there. Is audio video evidence required for Learning Aim A, or is it just written analysis? So in terms of that, we would require some actual clips of music. Now that can be pre-existing audio, it could be the learner doing some audio, or it could be video evidence of the learner doing some practical work as well. And the way it's presented in the authorised assignment brief is around a blog or a vlog. So actually embedding that material onto like a blog on a website or something like that is one way to approach it. I know other centres have approached it by doing just like a PowerPoint type presentation with embedded audio and video in there as well. So that's another sort of way to approach that. But we would need some audio video evidence in there as the examples that they're using. And over here for component 1, but can students avoid performing component 2, Learning Aim A as well, so that they can avoid performing completely? Yes. So although it kind of says in there that they should, in the teaching and learning, experience all three, but in terms of the assessment, what they would cover is actually a choice of 2 out of the 3 disciplines of performing, creating, or production. So again, they don't have to choose performing as an area that they get assessed on for component 2. They can just focus it on that production and creating type route in there as well. Do you have any advice about composition software? Spadius isn't right for my cohort, and I've just lost that question, sorry. We don't have Mac, so GarageBand not available, but good things about Notion 6 and Ableton. There's lots of free resources in terms of that around at the moment. Most of the major sort of DAW suppliers do some sort of free version. What's it called? Cakewalk has just come back as a free version as well, which that used to be called Sonar, and that used to be very good. That was PC based. Presonus as well do a free version of their Studio One DAW as well. Cubase do some quite good deals on things as well, and I'm sure they do free versions. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head. I haven't looked at that for a while. But yeah, there's lots of options. Other people obviously mentioning Soundtrap and things like that as well in there. So there should be a good range of resources that you can use for that, being PC based as well. Is there an advised list of keywords you would expect learners to know by the time they reach year 10? There isn't particular a list of keywords. Obviously, the learning content that's listed in the spec are the main things to focus on there and look at. So I would focus the vocabulary around that used in the spec as well under the content. Is it like the content needed for example component is like to be reduced due to being off school for so long? I guess students don't seem to be doing much work. Right, in terms of that, we're looking at ways that we can support centres for their sort of year 10 cohorts and approaching the evidence at the moment. I'm in the process of getting together material and resources that we can recommend with colleagues like Senior Standards Verifier and Principal Standards Manager. And hopefully in a few weeks, I'll be doing an online session like this one around ways to approach delivery generally for BTEC music and music technology, considering the social restrictions that may be in place and things like online and blended learning a little more as well. So there's that's coming, but also in terms of learners that were going through assessment as well, we're looking at what can be done there and what we may have to change, but obviously everything like that needs to go through Ofqual and things like that as well, if we're making big changes to assessments. But there is obviously also a well-established special consideration process that we have. So if learners have been impacted during their assessments, then that is a possibility to apply for that as well. And so we're looking at some different ways that we can support everyone with that as well. So could you add a BTEC section to focus on sound? That's something that would need to be discussed with them. People just commenting on the resources there. Do the resources have information about different genres? This is the main thing, of course, is missing compared to GCSE. So yeah, there's a few comments around that there. Teach a lot of EAL pupils, so video would be the best way forward for us. Anyways, EAL students gain better marks without having to write. So in terms of the evidence that is produced for BTECs, it's always been very flexible. And so video evidence has always been accepted for things like presentations or students just talking through instead of actually writing things down in an essay form. When I was lecturing and mainly delivering the level 3 BTEC in FE college, lots of the learners that I had, wonderful musicians, terrible at writing. So we always found the best way to approach a lot of the explanations that they did was actually to get them sit down and talk it through to a video camera rather than writing it down in an essay. So that's certainly a way of approaching that. I'd like to track different styles, BandLab. What are the expectations with regards to the teacher observation record forms? Teacher observation records can obviously form part of the evidence towards assessment. It's an optional thing that you can do, obviously noting down what you're observing and when you've observed things and things like that. But I mean, they're not a requirement in terms of the assessment records that go in there or things that would be used for assessment, but they can obviously add weight to decisions that you're making in there as well. Any updates on component 2, estimated grade split across year? I know that your learners are in this situation, and I don't have any sort of further information at the moment. As I said, I've talked it through with colleagues. We are aware that this is an issue, particularly for centres that are delivering the Tech Award, not just in music, in many of the other sectors as well, because of the situation that the way the Tech Award is structured. It kind of leans towards the component 2 falling across academic years. So it is something that is I think a problem which centres are encountering with that are delivering the Tech Award. So we are obviously looking at how we can support centres, as I've said before. I haven't got anything confirmed yet, but we will update centres with that as soon as possible, and what we can do. When studying a genre, if they have done a longer example, could they use this for learning aim B and write about the style from a listening perspective for learning aim A? Yeah, they could certainly do a longer example and use that for learning aim B, and then they could just take an extract from that to use as learning aim A. That's not a problem. I was under the impression that you had to complete a component within an academic year, to not carry it over from year 10 or 11. Is that not the case? So it is learning aims or assignments that can't be split over academic years, but a unit or a component could be. So for example, with component 2 here, you could deliver learning aim A in year 10 and finish the assessment of that. You would then deliver learning aim B and set an assignment for that in the next academic year. So that is a possibility. But you just, depending on what specification you're delivering, just be sure that learning aims aren't being split. So because in some of the BTEC nationals, some of the learning aims are sort of joined and funneled as you go through pass, merit and distinction, so that they can't be split up, whereas others like Tech Award can be. So it's just to make sure that you're doing what's needed there. So just to make that clear. Okay, so just to finish off, I did mention some changes that were going to happen to the Tech Award for 2024 measures. So that would be first teaching from 2022. As I said, there is going to be a change of requirement for all Tech Award qualifications. So all qualifications that are going on to the Technical Award list of qualifications that go towards key stage 4 performance measures. And the main thing that is happening with this is that actually all internally assessed components are going to change from being a criterion sort of grade based component to a points based moderated component. So it'd still be internally assessed, you would still mark it, but it's going to change to a points based system and moderation rather than standards verification. So that's the main thing that will be changing with the Tech Award. We're in the process of doing that with plans to submit to DFE next year. I think the deadline for that to submit things is in April. We would then expect feedback and hearing if that's on key stage 4 performance measures during that summer or into autumn there as well. So someone's just asked, is this internal and external moderation? So so it would be internally marked and then externally moderated. So is this like GCSE where you submit the points for each learner to the moderator and they select a sample? So yes, exactly. So it will be essentially like the GCSE type system where you would mark it and give it a certain number of marks. It would then, the moderator, a sample is then generated, which gets sent off to the moderator, and then that's looked at and moderated. So that's the key change that will happen to the Tech Award, but that won't be until first teaching from 2022. So there's still a couple of years on the current system in place. During that process, we are going to tidy up a few of the things in the spec as well, and just to make things a bit clearer as well, and that will change the way and some of the things in terms of component 1 that are marked, but essentially the same content. The content won't particularly change. It's just the approach to the assessment that will change to do with that. So here is contact details. There's links here to the Contact Us portal where you can submit any questions you have. There's also a link to the Pearson Music community pages. Again, I post things in there. And that's where I'll post a recording of this session as well. So it's useful to join that group as well in there. Just someone asking, COVID-19, will the component 3 be released earlier than January 2021? There is the provisional timetable for the Tech Awards online, and actually the date that they've given in the provisional timetable is actually early February for 2021 assessment. I think I've put in a request to have that date changed slightly, so I'm just waiting to hear back around that, but it's likely to be a similar time in terms of when it's released in the window for submission. But obviously, in terms of requirements and changes that may happen during next year as we go along, we really do have to see at the moment. But we've got to kind of go ahead with things as a business as usual type approach, but obviously we'll be keeping that monitored. Is there training on component 2 and 3 as well? I haven't got any dates as yet, but I'll certainly be covering that soon and releasing those details around those shortly, yes. If year 9 has not completed a unit component, and then as schools are shut, they are expected to redo the entire component in year 10. They've been asked to submit predicted unit component 1 grades. Okay, just in response to that question, was the component due to be completed by the 31st of July this year? Okay, then if the component was due to be completed by 31st of July and your learners are registered on the program, then you should be submitting a centre assessment grade for those learners as well. But they would also need to be included in the overall rank order that you're submitting. So that's the other thing that you'd have to do there as well. Okay. I find it odd that the centre wouldn't do the centre assessment grades for them, because I think otherwise you're adding extra burden to those learners. The same because it isn't going to count in performance measures. I don't think that's actually been confirmed. In terms of GCSE and GCE A level, DFE confirmed things around performance measures there, but they haven't confirmed anything around vocational qualifications, what would be included on, say, like 2021 measures in terms of centre assessment grades. So they haven't, at DFE, haven't actually specified what would happen. But I think we are inquiring around that as well, and just to get confirmation so we can confirm with centres, but I haven't heard anything more on that at the moment. So something like that is coming down to a centre decision, and I think that's something that needs to be discussed. Obviously, the deadline for submitting a centre assessment grade is today, so I don't think I'm not sure about late submissions. I'm sure there will probably be some leeway for some centres that may not be able to meet the deadline here and there, but that may be you might need to request an extension there as well through your exams officer. So yeah, I can't confirm what would count on 2021 measures, or 22 is it? It would be for a year 9. So that's something that would need to be looked at, and as I said, we've asked for confirmation but haven't had any as yet. Okay. So I hope you've all found the session useful. As I said, this has been recorded. I'll make a recording available on the Pearson Music community pages probably early next week. And I hope you've found this useful and take things away that you can put into practice. Thank you for attending.